Welcome to the If You Build It, Will They Learn podcast, a show dedicated to modern learning and development. With your hosts, Daniel Mendonca and Scott Babcock.
It's podcast day. Welcome to the show. This is If You Build It, Will They Learn? I'm Scott Babcock, and I'm here with your co-host, Daniel Mendonca. Daniel, we are back. How are you feeling?
Feeling great. Happy to be here. I'm excited. This is a good one. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this one. We decided to do something out of left field, a little different, a little wacky. So we have a very special interview that we want to play first, and then we'll spend some time talking about it. We promise it did have some thought into an actual discussion topic for the day, but a little something different. So we're going to go ahead and play that interview first, and then we'll talk about it when it's finished. All right, on today's show, we wanted to do something kind of different and a little bit of fun. And I thought, why not interview a couple of fine young gentlemen that live near me? In fact, they live in my house. So I've invited my two boys, Mason and Oliver, to come join me for a quick little interview. And I'm going to give them some questions, and we're just going to kind of talk through some stuff that Daniel and I want to spend a little bit of time on the podcast today. So, boys, why don't you guys say hello to the audience?
Hello. Hi!
Lots of excitement and enthusiasm about this recording today. So, boys, I've given you kind of a task, and we want to ask you a couple quick questions. The first one is, and I think Oliver wants to go first, so we'll let him, is if you were going to throw a party or a big event, and you could get it anywhere you wanted. It doesn't have to be a place. It can be anywhere in your imagination. But ultimately, where would you make your party or your big event? And then I want you to tell me a little bit about it. So what does the place you're going to put your event look like?
At Disney World with 54 roller coasters.
54, a very important distinction.
And 41 people. And then when you hit a button, and if anybody else hits any more button, the more people hit the button, the more candy comes down from the sky.
Okay, so so Oliver would have his party at Disney World with 54 roller coasters, 41 people. That's a really good ratio. You're not going to have to wait in line very long. I like that. And if you push a button, candy comes down from the sky. Have I got all that right? Mm-hmm. All right. So Mason, same question to you. If you could have any kind of party, anywhere you want, anywhere in the world, what would it look like and where would it be? And tell me a little bit about it.
It would be on a black stage with red curtains behind it, and there'd be 4 little desks with 4 PCs, and then you would play with your favorite YouTubers. So you get to pick 3 of your favorite YouTubers, and then and then you would get to play with them. And then if you won, you get ice cream, and if you lose, you have to do a Nerf gun war, and whoever wins that gets ice cream.
So lots of ice cream for winning different competitions. Yours is taking place on just a stage with a black stage with a red curtain.
If you lose, the Nerf gun battle is outside.
Oh.
And you're playing Fortnite, not Call of Duty or Warzone or stuff like that.
So we're playing Nerf gun battle Fortnite outside outside is when you play for ice cream if you don't win the main game. Gotcha. So yours is very video game themed.
If you win the first game, everybody gets 5 things of ice cream.
Gotcha. So there's
2
5
scoops on each cone.
Wow, 5 ice cream cones with 2 scoops on each one. All right. So you've got ice cream.
Scoops of ice cream.
Candy, we've got that. I like that a lot. So we've got some good ideas there. What do you think? What's the most imaginative thing you could put in there that would make your event really unique? What's something that'd be super different than anything else? So, like Disney World already has roller coasters. What could you do to make them super unusual?
It would just be really fun, but I would make it safe, but it would also be really fun. There is people can join. When you want to go, you just have to try to catch a ride. There's no stopping the roller coaster.
Oh, so you have to jump right onto the roller coaster while it's in mid-motion. That sounds tricky, but he's promised us that he'd make it safe, so I appreciate you're looking out for our safety. Mace, what would be something that could be really unique and unusual about yours? I mean, don't get me wrong, playing a Fortnite game of Nerf gun battle for ice cream is pretty unusual.
And with your favorite YouTubers.
You realize that YouTubers do more than just play video games too, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Just checking. All right. So what else would be really unusual?
Instead of a black floor, I'd actually do like glass floor with LED lights under it.
There we go.
And then like all the walls would be glass with LED lights, and then the curtain would be like a mix of colors. It'd be like a rainbow color.
Okay, so now we're mixing a lot more colors and some cool lights and stuff to make it pop. I like that a little bit.
And I would make like I would make like a huge mountain out of cardboard, and I would make a bridge, but it's made out of glass, and if you lose, you have to go on that, and if you win, you get to play like water balloon fight, or like you would stand under a bucket, and if you hit the target, the bucket would fall on you.
Gotcha. So the reality is you've got now cardboard mountains and glass bridges and water buckets and water balloon fights and stuff. I see where this is going. We could keep spiraling and coming up with all kinds of crazy new ideas, but I wanted to use this as just an opportunity to kick off and talk to the boys, get their ideas on something fun and different. So thank you, boys. I want to say that first and foremost for coming and hanging out with me for a few minutes. Daniel and I are probably going to spend a little bit of time talking about just your ideas and how that works in training and some other areas. But why don't we go ahead and say goodbye to everyone, and hopefully you'll get a chance to talk to them some other time.
Goodbye. Goodbye. I hope I can be on another podcast.
All right. We'll invite you guys back sometime. So thank you, boys, for your time, and we will talk to you in a little while.
Bye.
All right. Well, it was a good time to have my kids on. They have been talking about wanting to spend some time on the podcast. They have aspirations of becoming YouTubers. You may have guessed by my oldest comments. But this really did have a moment. We wanted to spend some time today thinking about creativity in the learning and development space. And we thought the kids would make a great intro into our conversation and kind of highlight some key things that we think really can help a learning and development team think differently about their content. And I know we mentioned some of the trends and some of the ways people are thinking differently. I think this is just an extension of that. It also aligns really well, shameless plug, to the Haylight blogs for the month of March, where we're going to be talking a lot about creativity in learning and development as well. So hopefully you'll check those out. So one of the things that always amazes me, and even as Dan and I were listening to the interview and commenting, he said it as well, is like the kids are amazing in the way they think. Just the kind of rambling stream of everything that happens, and you heard it with Oliver trying to like one up each other and stepping in, going, "Oh yeah, I totally forgot about this piece," and they add on a little bolt on, a little note of creativity to their thought. And I think that's a good lesson for all of us as adults. And we'll talk about why potentially we have some trouble with that. But always think about your inner child. Don't be afraid to let them play a little bit and have a good time, and think about what we're doing in the learning and development space. It can be fun. It doesn't have to be just for the purpose of accomplishing a task or checking off a box on a list. But like, there's no reason learning shouldn't be fun, in my opinion. And a lot of that comes from just thinking differently and maybe with a different mindset. And possibly just think about your younger self and what you would have dreamed up in a world where you didn't have a lot of limits.
Yeah, I use this example all the time with Oakley. Obviously, she's only 1 years old now, but she's always just looking like she's having such a great time, and the things that she does, and she hops into her ball pit. And I think it goes back to just the simplicity of it, and the simplicity of creating your own kind of unique, fun experience with what you have. And my positivity point, we'll touch on that later today. But I think Scott Mason and Oliver were so funny, and I enjoyed it so much because you got exactly what they were thinking about in that very moment, and they weren't afraid to say it. And I think that so much of where our imagination sometimes in our creativity can be capped is from fear, and fear to be adventurous, fear to take chances, fear to reach out and voice your opinion to people in the room who maybe won't enjoy it, And I don't want to go down a marketing rabbit hole, but I might end up there at some point today. But it's so refreshing almost to hear the way Mason and Oliver chatted about where they would throw their party. And listen, I would go to that part. I would go to Oliver's party. 54 roller coasters, 41 people. I'd be whatever roller coaster I want. It'd be fantastic.
Yeah, your wait times would be amazing. And, you probably, I'm guessing, experienced a little bit of this now that you've experienced a Christmas with Oakley. And anyone who's had kids or been around kids has probably at least heard someone reference that you'll hold a big event, whether it's a birthday party or Christmas or whatever, right? And kids get a bunch of gifts, and the only thing they want to play with is the box. And it's true, like kids love a box. And as we get older, we think of them as things you've got to recycle or get to the dump or, put out with break them down to get them into the trash bin or whatever it is you do with your box. But it's cardboard. It's just a thing that holds other things. But to a kid, a box isn't a box. It's a spaceship, or it's a house, or it's a car, or it's a teleportation device, or my kids the other day, like they're really big on like not really hide and seek, but more like spy games, I guess. And so they try to think of like the creative way to like sneak up on each other. And literally the other day they were using a box the same way you would see in a cartoon, where they hide underneath a trash can, but the trash can moves a little bit and then it stops, and then it moves a little bit and it stops. And they were doing the same thing. But again, to them, it was like a cloaking device. I think it made them invisible as long as they weren't moving. And kids think that way. But at some point as adults, we slowly fall out of that kind of fun play, for a lot of us at least, and we stop thinking about it as an opportunity or a potential creative moment, and we start seeing it as just the cardboard box. And so I think even for kids that are that way all the time, like Oliver regularly grabs random household items, pens or a spatula or a Band-Aid box that's empty or whatever, and he turns it into a walkie-talkie or a magic wand or whatever. Like, just the creativity of taking what are normally everyday things and turning them into the extraordinary. I think that's the joy and the beauty of what kids do. And honestly, some of my like moments where I just need to get my head thinking differently, I've been doing this with my kids for a long time. When I have a business need that I need to address and I'm just up against a wall, not quite coming to terms with how it should be, a lot of times I ask them what they would do in a similar type situation. Not that they're going to give me the answer that's going to drive great revenue going forward, but they at least make my head think in a different way. I start contemplating, well, yeah, what if I didn't do it that way? Or what if I really took this idea of a roller coaster and instead of a roller coaster, I turn it into something else? But a lot of times they're a great source of inspiration for me in that world where I just start thinking differently. And I appreciate that about kids all the time.
Yeah, it really is something to admire, and I think it's a lesson learned. I think that we live in a world, and you mentioned YouTubers and how your kids want to be them. And I feel like every 10-year-old, or I know your kids are younger than that, but that's how they feel right now. But if you look back at a lot of people who have made careers out of Vine, if you look back, even Facebook, but Instagram, influencers is something that's positive now. YouTubers and now TikTok. The ones who have been able to be successful are the ones who just go out and like do it and say it with no fear, which obviously there's downsides to that too, but and they put it out there and they can, they become viral or whatever that may be. And there are people who are afraid to press submit on that blog post or upload on that video or whatever that is. And I feel like that relates to business so much, of sitting in a room of all your peers and where you're, having an ideation session and people aren't interested in voicing their opinion because they're afraid what people are going to think. And I think that what's the term, Scott? There's no success in your comfort zone. There's no comfort in your success. Is it something like that? Or growth?
No growth in the comfort zone and no comfort in the growth zone. Yep.
Yeah, I think that applies here. And I think it goes back to the way, that inner child and that imagination.
I think we can even tie it back. We did it on a mailbag episode where someone asked, what was the hardest part about starting a podcast or whatever, and or what are the tips and tricks to getting going? And truthfully, it was just saying like, all right, cool, we're recording today and we're going to put it out there in the world and see how it goes. Like, the hardest part is just getting started sometimes, and you have to be willing to take that leap. and whether or not we're going to be tremendously successful superstars, I don't know that Daniel and I ever will, but we're still enjoying it and we're having a good time, and we get to push the limits on thinking a little differently for ourselves and having a conversation around it, which is kind of the whole point of what we're doing here.
Yeah, I would say, just to end on this before we can progress, I would say that I've had a dozen, 2 dozen, maybe more conversations with current clients, potential clients, or people, industry peers, because of this podcast, and it's allowed me to think differently, because of those conversations, and hearing you challenge, my ideas, but us speak freely, relates back to that imagination, and that has allowed it to be successful. So yeah, went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think it all fits into kind of what's next.
Kids obviously give us a great perspective on creativity and play and innovative thinking in a lot of ways, but when we think about the learning and development space, and which is really why we're holding this podcast, and hopefully you bared with us through the fun conversation that opened up the session today. What is it when it comes to an adult that potentially makes them think less creatively, or where do you find limits? And that's one of the things I think we can talk about when we talk about adult learning, when we talk about even just the creativity in the business space and being innovative thinking and brainstorming. What are some of those notions? That's what we want to talk about that create those barriers for adults as we get older. Why don't we just turn the cardboard box into the spaceship and fly off and do the Kessel run in 12 point whatever parsecs? That's the reality of being an adult, is sometimes we don't think that way anymore. And where does that come from? So I want to explore that a little bit and talk about ways we can start to overcome some of those notions or things as learning and development professionals that we need to think about as we talk about those components. Um, the first thing is, and look, it's experience. That's really where I think we can start. And Daniel mentioned one, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more with fear, but experience drives our reality. And so often, what you believe to be true through experiences you've had will potentially limit the way you're willing to think about something going forward. So you get stuck in a little bit of a notion that things can't be different than they are. But the reality is, the world's ever changing, and we'll spend more time on the technology side of how this comes to life. But we need to open up our minds to the reality that just because it has always been doesn't mean it will always be in that notion.
Yeah, I think on that note as well, it's a combined kind of misperception of of your audience, and I think that comes from experience. I love the concept that the creative is subjective, and we've done this. We've had projects and things that we do internally at Halite that have, that we thought from our experience were going to have major impact, and be, go over super well, and then they kind of like land softly, right? um, and then you progress and you put things out that maybe you're okay with or you're not 100% on, and you put it out there, and the reception is just fantastic, and you're just like, huh. And it comes down to the fact that, in your experience, nobody can predict anything, and I think that it is subjective to who your audience is, and you come to dig deeper and learn who your audience is as you kind of open your mind to that creativity.
And from the L&D side of things, if you sort of embrace the notion that people have these experience moments that have taught them something, and right or wrong, that preconceived notion that they've kind of baked into their brain as something I now know, you have to start to overcome some of those in the learning or the education space you're going to play into, and know that exists. With kids, they're typically a blank slate, especially as they're growing through sort of the primary elementary system, where they don't have a lot of those pre-taught or pre-experienced notions that have to be overcome. You can start kind of from scratch and build, whereas an adult, you might have to even break down some stuff. I'll give you a really great example. It still blows my mind, and I'm sure the internet is full of 1,000 of these if you need more examples. But I was taking a physics class in college, and just an introductory level one, and there was a class that we were going through, and the professor said there's no such thing as centrifugal force. Now, I, for the better part of 20 years, was under the impression that when I had a string with a tennis ball on the end of it and I swung it around, there was a force that made the ball go in a circle. I think most of us have always believed that to be true. And it turns out there isn't. There is a force that makes the ball go out and forward, but never around. We spent 2 days having him go through and show us repeatedly that it isn't the ball moving in a circle. It's the string pulling on the ball, which is the result of the ball going out and then the ball going forward, but being tied back in because of that outward force. Literally still makes my head hurt. But it was something I had to unlearn so that I could relearn it the right way. And I think that's really important when we talk about adult learning is you might have to break down some things that people might hold somewhat dear in order to make them relearn something or change their perspective. And that comes with some change management that we've talked about in the past and how we address that.
You lost me there with the science talk for a second,
That
Scott,
happens.
but I came back around, and I think I know where you're. I know where you're going. No, it's change management is an interesting part of it, but I think it goes back to that culture of learning and your corporate environment that we've talked about before. The ability to have imagination, the ability to ask questions that maybe won't be perceived well. I think if you can have an open environment where you can be honest and have your opinion out there, I think that that creates a simpler environment for that change, and a simpler environment for people to feel comfortable to voice their opinions and receive feedback on them.
So let's dive in a little bit to, you mentioned fear, right? The fear of many things, I'm sure, that also sway the way an adult thinks. And that really becomes an important part of limiting creativity as well, right? The fear of maybe it's getting rejected, having your idea not be received well by the greater audience. Maybe it's the fear of responsibility. Maybe it's you're concerned that your idea is going to force you to have a whole lot of new job responsibility that you weren't planning for. Being laughed at or ridiculed, like that's the reality. I think even as adults, you're always concerned that you're going to be seen as less than because of an idea, and that's a tough one. I think for everyone to think about how do we overcome that. Any thoughts there, Daniel, and just in terms of from a learning and development side, like what are good ways to start thinking about fear and how we maybe make that a safe space for people?
I don't know if this is the best advice for everyone, but I'm going to speak from personal experience, going back to where we started. The reality that 99% of stuff that occurs in your day to day doesn't actually matter is a huge relief and ability to take chances. So I'm gonna peel back the onion on that a little bit, because people are like, wait, everything matters. And this is a conversation that I had with Sabrina when she joined Haylight, and with others, right? The conversation of that, like, yeah, as long as your intent is good, something you say or something you do really isn't going to have that negative effect that can't be changed. Or if you put that out there, their feedback, you have to be able to understand that, like, their feedback is good, and you need to not have any sort of regrets about it, even if it's poor feedback or negative feedback or constructive criticism. Just doing with no, I guess, assumption or expectation of what's going to come in return. I think just 99% of stuff doesn't matter. And if something goes wrong, you can fix it. And if it's something's not received well, okay. We talked about it when we talked about KPIs and objectives. You put something out. If you don't put something out there in the fear that you're not going to hit your KPI or you're not going to hit your objective because you have a fear of that, the reality is that as long as you have created the right scenario and the right situation, that failure or that loss in that situation doesn't technically matter, because you can progress forward and grow from it. So I think that's where I start, is just, in the grand scheme of things, 99% of what occurs on a day-to-day doesn't actually matter, and it can be resolved, it can be improved on, and you can grow from it.
Yeah, I think from a learning and development standpoint, one of the things that I would encourage is, we've talked about it on other episodes, and Daniel alluded to it on the KPIs and measurement component, is treat opportunities. We won't even call them failures or misses, but treat those opportunities as growth moments. it's okay to get something wrong, or it's okay to not pass the quiz, as long as you're being supported to then go out and get the information and come back and relearn or keep learning to get better at something. If you miss the mark, what could you revamp? What can you recreate? Especially as we're talking about creativity and thinking differently, like what is the way you can readdress that moment and make it better for the next time? So if you're treating those as opportunities to get better, to be stronger, those are great opportunities as a learner. And then from an L&D perspective, are you creating an environment that it enables that or allows for that to be something that happens with support and guidance and direction, where as a learner, if I do fall down, someone's going to help me get back up and help me try again and not feel discouraged. um, you'll hear the reference, I think, in the L&D space a lot, of the carrot and the stick. Are you giving more incentives to try again to get it right, or are you giving the stick saying, hey, you fell down and now I'm going to hold you accountable? And now that's where you're instilling fear into your system and your culture. If everything is about, oh my gosh, I can't fail because I'm going to have my manager, ridicule me or yell at me or hold me accountable or performance manage me all the time, if that's your starting point, is that your culture is speaking that way, you're likely going to have learners who are already fearful of the way they might fail and thus don't take the chances to grow and try to be better. So as we keep having this conversation around creativity, I want to bring it back to where we started the conversation with listening to the boys talk about the possible. And I think that should be the landing message. I know we talked a little bit about fostering and developing a culture that isn't about accountability and supporting folks through their fears and through their ability to try new things. And I want that to be really the message that lands out of this. Listening to the boys talk about what's possible in their world, I think, is a great way to approach your learning and development space, your content, your culture. Enjoy having really fun dialogue around why not, in a lot of ways, I think, is a great way to kind of phrase that. Encourage your people to think differently, try new things, and really explore, because you never know what could come out of some of those. And I think that's just a great lesson from watching kids try the same exercise.
Yeah, I think, Scott, you're around the basketball court, and obviously you have two young boys. You're around the baseball diamond a lot with kids. I've coached myself a lot, and I have a lot of close friends who are teachers. I think the imagination of kids is refreshing, and there is just so much we can learn from our kids, and not so different than what we've learned through the past 12 months during this pandemic. Is they're resilient, they're creative, they're innovative, can they know how to approach situations differently with an open mind and find success. And I think that is a lesson that should be carried all the way through life. And I think that I'm gonna go down a weird path now, Scott. I think if you walk into a room at the company you work at and you are afraid to voice your opinion, you may need to want to overthink if that's the right culture, or how can you affect it positively. Because if you're working on an L&D team and you're nervous about being able to recommend cool new ideas or innovative thoughts, I'm not so sure what the learning culture or the culture is like for you to be successful in that role. So I didn't think I was going to end up there, but I did. So
But I don't think that's a bad notion. And it's not to say you need to go quit your job and
Yeah.
go find another company. But I think you mentioned it in there, is what needs to change and how do you have that conversation with folks, but realize that it can all come from the best possible place, that you're trying to make something better. And that hopefully is something that can resonate with your leader or your peers or whoever it is you're talking about, that you're looking to change in a positive manner. And if anything has come out of the last 12 months for adults, right? I don't think kids have had to think differently because they always were thinking that way. But as adults, we've been forced to say, holy cow, nothing works the way we thought it did. How do we get innovative? How do we get creative? How do we think differently and kind of put some of our norms aside and say, we've got to try some stuff that isn't what we've always done? And I think while that was forced upon us, it's probably taught most of us to embrace that way of thinking a little bit more than we ever have in the past. And I think you're going to find more people receptive to that dialogue to say, I have an idea. I think it could be really helpful to us. I want to change something about the way we do it because either it's inefficient or it's scary or it's inappropriate or whatever. There could be a whole lot of things that just historically have been built up to be more status quo. And you can start to say, I want to change some of those norms. And I think more people are going to be receptive to that thinking now than they ever have before, because we've proven a lot of those stereotypes about work and business and time management and all of these things that aren't really required of us, even though we maybe thought they were in the past.
So, just to wrap up statement here, Scott, think outside the box. Take chances, get messy, make mistakes. Miss Frizzle for the Magic School Bus taught us that. Right?
Wow, we're going deep into our library of references now.
I'm just saying it's think like your kids. It's use your imagination, have fun with your day to day. It makes everything a lot refreshing and a lot more refreshing, and who knows what sort of success you'll find on the other side.
And with that's a great tie-in to our last moment. We always bring a positivity point to the end of the show, and I think I want us to embrace our inner child and some fun and some creativity and some positivity in our life. And I think kids often bring that to us as well. And I don't know exactly where Daniel's going to go, but I know where I'm headed, so I'm gonna make the nice leap. Tennessee got a ridiculous amount of snow for Tennessee. Now, not as much as Windsor got. I already know Daniel's going to one up my measurement count here on my snowfall, but we got about 3-ish to maybe 4 inches of snow here, which for us is quite a bit. And my kids just went back to school for the first time today, and that in and of itself is a small positivity point. After 6 days off for 3 inches of snow, which seems a bit ridiculous, but here we are. Yesterday was almost 55 degrees here. But what it allowed us to do during that 6 days was play and be kids. We were sledding in our backyard. We had snowball fights. The kids got to build snowmen. And while it wasn't as impressive as it would have been in Minnesota, where I think at last count there were 2 or 3 feet of snow with some of the folks I was talking to in their driveways, the kids were just giddy about it. And they had so much fun. And, they were layered up and they were inside, outside, drinking hot cocoa. And it was a fun week watching them play, and more importantly, getting to go out and play with them. I think that was a lot of fun for us. And now the snow's gone, and we'll enjoy going back into warmer weather and spring, and baseball starts here in a week. So, but yeah, it was a good week of just play for us, and that was fun.
Positivity points all about the snow this week. Yeah, I definitely unleashed my inner child, and I'm gonna make a confession. I think that I've had a lot of milestones in my life, a lot of them that have been great. I'm going to say that I think Saturday was the most rewarding day of my entire life to this point. It's a pretty bold statement. When I said it, my wife Hillary laughed at me, but we got about a foot of snow in Windsor, which is a lot for Windsor, and a single snowfall. And the wind was pretty bad last week, so the drifts were huge. And I had about 2 to 3 feet of snow across my entire front yard. So what I decided to do was, and once again, Oakley's only 1. So the amount of space I needed was not huge. I basically I called it a snow maze, but it turned out to be more like a bobsled track, and had a little hill at the start. And Oakley's pretty adventurous, and she likes to get flipped around and thrown around and all this stuff. And she jumps on the couch and stuff. But we basically made a bobsled track with a hill that went into it. She basically maxed out her time that a 1-year-old could spend outside in the snow before they're just completely miserable. And then the next day went out on Sunday. So we had 2 stints on Saturday, went out on Sunday. And then I was cleaning the garage Sunday night, and Hillary brought her out to the doorway, and she was pointing at her sled and going like, bah, 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 bah. So she wanted to go sled. So it was pretty fun. I honestly, like I said, it's going to be something that Oakley won't remember, but 10 years from now, I'm going to remember this moment. And I was just in full dad mode. In a year of the pandemic, where I wasn't able to be in full dad mode all the time because I was locked in a house, I was out there with a shovel Saturday, digging out a bobsled track in my front yard. So.
And the videos are amazing. So yeah, she very clearly had a great time, and Dad Dad appeared to be having a pretty good time too. So it's a great way to spend it. I'm glad we both got chances to do a little bit of fun stuff with our kids and, enjoy the cold, snowy weather, which is maybe not everyone's favorite. But yeah, it was a good time. And bringing out our inner kid, which was the whole point of this episode, is embrace that inner child moment and really get creative. Do something fun with your time and your thoughts and your energy. But that will do it for us today. Hopefully you've enjoyed the show. I'm Scott Babcock. He's Daniel Mendoza, and we will talk to you next week.
Have a good one,
Thank you for
everybody.
listening to another episode of the If You Build It, Will They Learn podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Join the conversation by emailing us at podcast@haylight.com. Find us on social media at Build It, Learn It, and be sure to check us out on the web at www.haylight.com. That's HALIGHT.com.